Downtown Brooklyn, a member and leader of the Bloods.
Murder is the charge against an aspiring rapper accused of living the thug life.
They allege that Heron is guilty of racketeering charges for running a drug-dealing operation in the Gowanus housing development where he grew up.
When we engage in these acts, we knowingly understand what comes with this. We want the lights and we want the glitter and we want this, but we understand the only thing that's promised is jail or death.
Raw Diggs, the gangster known for running a terrifying Bloods faction in Brooklyn, operated with methods no one ever imagined.
Well, Steve, a very dramatic day here. I was in the courtroom as this accused Bloods gang leader and rapper on the rise tried to counter the government's claims that he's a killer drug lord who terrorized his own community.
As the leader of the Murderous Mad Dog Bloods, Raw Diggs maintained violent control over the Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens drug markets.
No question. Mad City, man. No question. It's Mad Dog world out here, you know?
But what set him apart was the crazy trick he used to target and eliminate his ops. According to court testimony, he and his men would dress as women to hunt rivals.
And he told the jury that he got the idea for dressing like a woman to do the from Raw Diggs.
Using wigs, lipstick, and loose clothing, they blended into the neighborhood, allowing them to approach targets unnoticed and strike swiftly before vanishing without a trace. Let's dive in. The ultimate disguise: wig, lipstick, and a murderous mandate. Without evidence, Raw Diggs' crazy style of carrying out hits against his ops would have sounded like another unbelievable street gossip. But out in federal court, people got to know every wild part of it. Diggs was 32, a rapper building buzz, and the feds were saying he'd murdered 3 people.
They also claim he was involved in 3 murders and 3 attempted murders and introduced his music videos as evidence.
The main voice behind the story was Saquon Wallace, a convicted dealer who used to run with Raw Diggs. Wallace told the court that Diggs straight up instructed him to throw on a wig, some lipstick, and makeup, all to go pull off a hit. The target was Jabari Foster, someone who used to be close to Heron but decided to break ranks and keep selling drugs in Wyckoff Gardens. In the streets, that wasn't just disrespect. It was a direct challenge to Heron's authority, especially since his crew already controlled the crack trade in the nearby Gowanus houses. Now picture this. Wallace is over 6 feet tall and more than 200 pounds. Not exactly someone you'd casually mistake for a woman, but according to him, he pulled it off. He wore a long shirt that looked like a dress. And somehow, it worked. He said he walked through those dark Wyckoff Gardens hallways, waiting for Foster to step out of a party, and the moment Foster showed himself, Wallace handled the job quickly. After that, he tossed the wig, the clothes, everything so nothing could be traced back. And here's the wildest part. Wallace said the whole idea came from Raw Diggs himself, and it wasn't just a one-time trick. Heron and his crew, the Murderous Mad Dog Bloods, had used this method more than once. That alone shows how far Heron was willing to go to keep control of the drug game. The logic behind it was simple. Nobody pays attention to a woman walking through the projects at night. So by dressing these big guys up like women, Heron made it easier to get close to a target without raising suspicion. Heron's cross-dressing tactic wasn't just some wild idea he tried one time. It was part of a bigger pattern, a system he built on structure, loyalty, and straight-up calculated moves. And to get why he went to those extremes, you've got to look at the world he came from and the crew he put together. Ronald Heron, better known as Raw Diggs, grew up in the Gowanus houses in Brooklyn, a place shaped by poverty, street politics, and long-running neighborhood beefs. Born in 1982, he hit his teenage years surrounded by older gang members who already controlled the local drug scene. Before he was even an adult, he'd bounced in and out of juvenile facilities, learning the street code, the loyalty rules, and the retaliation mindset that drove New York's gang world. The Bloods are one of the biggest gangs in America, and in New York, they're split into different sets that run their own operations, but still rep the larger Blood identity crews like UBN, the Brims, the Bishops, and different Pyru cliques. Heron's set, the Murderous Mad Dogs, carved out their own lane inside that structure. They focused heavily on the coke trade that kept Brooklyn's underground economy alive, and their main base was 423 Baltic Street, a key spot in the Gowanus projects. But Heron didn't run things like a typical corner dealer. He built a layered operation where everyone had a role. He had sellers handling products, stash houses protected by people he trusted, and enforcers ready to deal with any threat immediately. That setup helped him push past Gowanus into nearby housing projects, which meant more territory, more money, and a lot more enemies. Later in life, even Ra himself admitted he was a wild, loose kid, and his empire reflected that energy.
These little be running around like I wasn't brought up. I was brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight. You feel me?
Territorial disputes became inevitable. The most frequent friction arose not from rival gangs, but from former associates who attempted to operate independently.
My name is Tyrone White. I'm a former 6'5" Menlo Crip. Some of my rivalries were the Blood gangs and the Crip gangs.
One of the first real signs of how far Heron would go to protect his operation was the murder of Jabari Foster in Wyckoff Gardens. That killing showed exactly how seriously he took any threat to the drug flow tied to his name. And the truth is, this wasn't a new mindset for him. Back in October 2000, Heron got shot in the leg during an argument over a drug debt. While he was lying in Kings County Hospital recovering, he didn't wait for revenge. He ordered his relatives to find the shooter and take him out. He later bragged about it in his music.
Beat the body with an 18 beat. If you ain't never beat a body, then you ain't like me.
But the bigger point was clear. Long before the feds came after him, violence was already his first response. As Heron pulled in more money, his operation had to grow with it. The Bloods and their many sets live off territory. Every corner, hallway, and apartment is part of the income stream. So for Heron, any kind of pushback, whether it was theft, disobedience, or someone trying to sell without his blessing, wasn't just disrespect, it was a threat to the business. And by late 2008, those pressures hit a breaking point. Over the next 16 months, several rivals or perceived enemies were taken out, each hit making the Murderous Mad Dogs look even more untouchable. Even though the cross-dressing tactic happened earlier, in 2006, it fit perfectly into the bigger playbook Heron relied on. He liked being unpredictable. He liked having an edge that cops didn't expect. Anything that gave him psychological leverage or helped him move under the radar became part of his strategy. At the end of the day, he had one goal: keep the drug money flowing, shut down any resistance, and make sure nobody mistook his adaptability for weakness. So by the time federal investigators finally mapped out how the Murderous Mad Dogs worked, Heron had already built a reputation that mixed street fear, gang loyalty, and a rising rap profile, a combination that made him even harder to ignore.
From the era where we sold it, we didn't use them per se, that was the quote-unquote slogan.
By late 2008, Ronald Raw Diggs Heron had already built a structured criminal operation. He had roles assigned, distribution points secured, and a hierarchy enforced with strict obedience. Over the next 11 months, he unleashed a wave of lethal enforcement aimed at anyone who threatened the Murderous Mad Dog's hold over Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens. This wasn't chaos for show, it was calculated. Each killing stabilized revenue, enforced discipline, and sent a clear message to rivals: challenge Heron, and you paid the ultimate price. The first major clash happened in early May 2008 with Richard Russo, a figure around 423 Baltic Street, Heron's main crack spot. Russo had openly questioned Heron's authority, even claiming he could kill him if pushed. In the world Heron ran, that kind of talk couldn't be ignored. Within days, Heron confronted Russo. On May 9th, 2008, in the lobby of 423 Baltic Street, he told Russo to step into the elevator with another MMD member. Once the doors closed, Heron shot Russo, killing him. Then he handed cash to the associate who witnessed it to ensure silence and had them dispose of the weapon. Quick, decisive, controlled, that became the hallmark of the period. Territory issues flared again with Kendale Smurf Robinson. His actions interfered with the flow of drug money through Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens. Heron ordered his elimination, showing that even former allies weren't safe if they threatened the operation. Another major dispute involved Victor Zapata. In November 2008, Zapata told one of Heron's crack sellers she couldn't sell in Wyckoff Gardens. When Heron's associate George Mejia challenged him, Mejia was shot multiple times on November 9, 2008. That attack escalated the feud. Heron and his crew even filmed a video, later deleted from YouTube, calling themselves Warriors and warning Zapata, "See you soon in the cemetery near you." Almost a year later, Heron delivered on that threat. On September 27, 2009, he found Zapata in a courtyard at Wyckoff Gardens and shot him multiple times. He watched as Zapata fell, making sure the warning he had issued months earlier came to life. The killing cemented his control and made clear that anyone interfering with his drug trade would face swift, deadly consequences. 4 days later, on October 1st, 2009, police arrested Heron in a double-parked BMW with an associate. They found a loaded 9mm handgun with no serial number, drugs, and evidence the weapon had been recently fired. That arrest ended the 11-month period during which Heron had systematically removed anyone who threatened his empire.
What was he convicted of?
They're trying to say a bunch of murders and drug things of that nature, so that.
These incidents, Russo in May 2008, Robinson by order, and Zapata in September 2009, marked a phase where Heron's enforcement strategy relied on precision rather than volume. Each act served the objective of maintaining uninterrupted narcotics revenue and eliminating variables that could destabilize the Murderous Mad Dog structure. After consolidating his control over the drug trade in Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens, Ronald "Raw Diggs" Heron kept another side of his life in the spotlight, his career as a hip-hop artist. On stage, he was Raw Diggs, projecting an image rooted in the same street rules and violence that ran his private life. On one side, he performed for fans. On the other, he was running hits and enforcing loyalty in Brooklyn's housing projects. That dual identity gave him clout, but it also left a trail. Heron's music became, in a way, a self-made record of his crimes. Federal prosecutors leaned heavily on his lyrics and videos, treating them as evidence of his gang activity. His songs detailed the drug trade, retaliatory killings, and the hierarchy of the Murderous Mad Dog Bloods. Heron and his longtime friend Shanduk McFadder insisted the music was just art, a reflection of the world they grew up in. But courts increasingly saw the recordings as more than entertainment, as proof he knew, orchestrated, and sometimes bragged about violent acts. Even if the lyrics alone couldn't convict him, they shaped jurors' perceptions, making his story and witness accounts feel more credible. Heron didn't just allude to violence, he boasted about it. In some tracks, he recounted surviving a gunshot to the leg and immediately ordering retaliation, even giving a timeline that matched real-life events. On the remix of Slow Down, he made coded references to killings linked to his crew, including the execution of Frederick Brooks. All of it, wrapped in music, became a form of unintentional self-snitching, a narrative that prosecutors could match to real crimes. His music also put the Murderous Mad Dogs front and center. He dropped the crew's acronym, detailed their methods, and emphasized his personal authority. Lyrics about loyalty and guns weren't just bravado, they mapped the structure of his operation. By narrating his business publicly, Heron blurred the line between entertainment and evidence, leaving a digital footprint that mirrored his criminal empire.
The music videos in and of themselves and the lyrics in and of themselves would never be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But could it be something that a jury takes into consideration when they're weighing the credibility of other witnesses or weighing the credibility of other evidence? Absolutely.
Heron didn't stop at music and street muscle. He also knew how to use technology to his advantage. Videos circulated online, sometimes showing acts of retaliation against rivals like Victor Zapata. Platforms like YouTube and social media let him do more than perform. They let him send messages, coordinate with his crew, and project power, all while keeping up his public image as a rapper. It was a mix of media savvy and street strategy, using modern tools as extensions of his control. This dual life was part of what made Heron so dangerous. The same man who could plan and execute stealth hits could also step on stage, record music, and turn his violent reality into performance. His creativity became a weapon, entertaining fans while intimidating enemies and reinforcing the reach of his Brooklyn gang empire. And when it came to tactics, Raw Diggs didn't just rely on guns. He leaned on psychological tricks most gangs never thought of. He knew one simple truth: people rarely see women as a threat. Heron turned that into an advantage, giving his crew the ability to strike fast, precise, and without warning, a perfect blend of planning, deception, and brutality. Female associates weren't just decoration in Heron's Murderous Mad Dog Bloods, they were tactical assets. The hit on Jabari Foster in Wyckoff Gardens showed this in action. Wallace, one of Heron's top associates, disguised himself as a harmless woman and walked right into the target zone. Because nobody expected a threat from that direction, the hit went down with minimal risk of detection. It was fear, misdirection, and planning all wrapped into one. Heron didn't just run things the way most crews did. A lot of gang leaders in prison pass the work to family or a few women they trust, just to keep the money flowing while they're locked up. But Heron took that whole idea to another level. He didn't just use women for support or messages, he used their look as a weapon. The female disguises weren't some side tactic. They were part of how he enforced power, scared rivals, and kept his crew one step ahead of anyone watching. That's really the lesson behind how Heron operated. In his world, being creative was just as important as being ruthless. He wasn't just trying to be violent, he was trying to stay unpredictable. By flipping normal expectations and using things people would never suspect, he kept both rivals and cops guessing. The disguises, the mind games, the misdirection. None of it was for show. It was all part of a plan that made Heron hard to read, hard to track, and even harder to challenge. The unraveling, the racketeering trial, and gang abatement. Heron's reign of calculated violence inevitably drew federal scrutiny, culminating in his arrest and a landmark racketeering trial. By early 2012, the full scope of his criminal enterprise, from drug distribution to multiple homicides, was laid bare in a sweeping 23-count indictment. Charges included murder in aid of racketeering, conspiracy, illegal firearm possession, and narcotics trafficking, reflecting the organized and hierarchical nature of his operations. The indictment painted Heron not merely as a street-level criminal, but as the orchestrator of a sophisticated, lethal enterprise. During the trial, prosecutors leveraged Heron's own artistic persona against him. Music videos and lyrics portraying the glorification of gang violence and murder provided context for jurors, framing his public identity as consistent with the brutal actions he ordered. Attempts to argue that the music represented artistic expression rather than literal confessions fell short, as the recordings reinforced witness testimony and highlighted Heron's mindset and leadership within the Murderous Mad Dog Bloods. In essence, Heron's own narrative contributed to his legal downfall, and the jury's verdict would determine if he was going to spend a lot of time behind bars.
Now, the final verdict will, of course, rest with a jury. It was very hard to gauge what the reaction was to what they're hearing, but there is a lot riding on their verdict, because if Heron is found guilty, he'll be facing life behind bars.
While awaiting trial, Heron's influence remained a concern for authorities. Solitary confinement at the Metropolitan Correctional Center did not fully sever his reach. Contraband cell phones raised fears that he might continue coordinating gang activities from behind bars. Online platforms like Twitter and YouTube became extensions of his intimidation strategy, demonstrating the modern challenge of containing criminal influence in the digital age. Authorities monitored these activities closely, recognizing that the fusion of social media and organized crime could amplify the threat to the community. Heron's downfall didn't happen in a vacuum. His prosecution fit into a larger strategy by law enforcement to tackle gangs across the country. Agencies increasingly turned to civil tools, injunctions, non-association orders, limits on movement to disrupt gang activity. Critics sometimes called these measures racially biased or overly strict, but the goal was clear: stop gangs from causing public harm. By taking Heron out of active leadership and hitting him with both civil and criminal controls, authorities disrupted the Murderous Mad Dog's operations and sent a message that sustained violence comes with consequences. In the end, Heron didn't fall because he wasn't smart. He got caught. His life as a rapper and gang leader finally caught up with him, and the empire he built started to collapse. But while the system closed in, the story of how he ran things still shows the rules he broke, the tricks he used, and the power he held. People might not glorify him the way they do others, but his rise and fall is proof of just how creative, ruthless, and unpredictable he was.